by Bubble Wrap. A bit of context about where I live, who I am. I live in a decently wealthy community in central New Jersey. Very low crime rates, just the occasional petty theft. Not really any problem with kids acting out. There's always that one guy, but it was few and far between. In high school, I tended to keep to myself and focus on my academics. I was a textbook nerd. I took all honors and advanced classes, was part of the high school band, orchestra, jazz ensemble, and pit orchestra. I had a nice group of friends, and never ventured out of that group. I admit, back then, I was extremely naive, and a bit of a pushover. Freshman year started off pretty normal. My town has 2 middle schools that combine into one high school, so half of the kids I had never met before. I quickly make my group of friends, most of them being in band, and occasionally have run-ins with some of the football players, since our marching band plays at all the football games. Most of them are nice to us, and overall appreciate that we play at all the games. One day after a game, I decide to head inside of the school to grab a book from my locker. I had forgotten to bring home earlier that weekend. All of the football players had made their way inside already to the boys' locker room. As I was passing by it, one of the freshman players happened to be sitting, leaned up against a locker, right outside the door. We made eye contact, and I politely smiled at him. Man, I was sort of friendly back then. He just stared at me blankly, not returning the smile. I shrugged this off, figuring he just felt like being a jerk. Whatever. I got my book and went home. Fast forward a few weeks. I start noticing the grumpy football player a lot more than I used to. As in, I never used to see him around before, but now I see him everywhere. I dismiss this as me only noticing him because he was stuck in my mind now, as a huge, unfriendly grump. I point out to a classmate I was friendly with, who was a member of the football team, that I keep seeing this kid all over the place, always awkwardly staring at me, not smiling. My classmate goes, "Oh, you mean Batman? Yeah, he's weird." I asked why he was called Batman, and my friend explained that whenever the football team changes in the locker room, Batman never changes in front of anyone. He always goes to the handicapped bathroom stall. A bunch of the guys noticed this, and asked why he did that. The kid replied, "It's my Batcave." So the name Batman stuck. I don't remember exact timing here, but a while after that, I was at home chatting with some friends on AIM. I know, this took place 10 years ago. Suddenly, a screen name that I didn't know popped up saying hello. I asked who the person was, and it turned out to be Batman. I had a friendly chat with him for a while, mostly me answering questions about how I enjoyed band, what instruments I played, if I was planning to major in music someday, etc. I thought nothing of the encounter and carried about my life as normal. Soon, he started messaging me every single day on AIM, even if my away message was up because I was trying to work on homework. He would just keep sending messages over and over until I responded. He eventually started asking more and more personal questions. What are you up to? Okay, seems pretty harmless. What are you doing this weekend? Also, seemed pretty harmless, especially if he was trying to become friends with me. Questions about my family, such as, do you have any siblings? What are their names? Where do you live? Didn't tell him, just said I lived in town, obviously. Do you have a cell phone? We should talk on the phone instead. I lied and said I didn't. I always saved these conversations every time they happened. He eventually started asking about my relationship status, which was taken at the time. He would ask about my boyfriend, if I loved him or not. Why was I with him? Then Batman would proceed to tell me that he would make a better boyfriend. Rub my feet, snuggle me, buy me stuff, blah, blah, blah. I politely shut him down by saying something like, no, sorry, I like my boyfriend, not looking for someone else. I then made up an excuse about having to go get ready for meeting friends for dinner, and he automatically assumed that meant I was going to go shower and said, oh, can I watch you shower? I immediately freaked the fuck out and blocked him. The next day in school, he was waiting for me at my locker in the morning. I saw him on my way down the hall and noped the fuck out of there, not bothering to get my books. I went to first period with nothing, still carrying my backpack, which was against school rules. My teacher immediately pointed this out and gave me detention for being both unprepared and carrying my backpack around. I sat quietly for the rest of class, trying not to cry. After class was over, she pulled me aside and asked if everything was okay. I broke down, telling her everything that had happened. She instantly turned an awful shade of angry purple and marched me down to the principal's office, where she advocated for me and demanded that disciplinary action be taken, and the Batman's parents be contacted. I felt so relieved and apologized profusely to her. For some reason, I felt guilty, like it was my fault he had acted that way toward me. She sternly put her hands on my shoulders and told me that it was never my fault for being harassed, and that if something like this happened again with anyone, to tell her. Unfortunately, she ended up retiring early after that year, when her husband was diagnosed with cancer. I'm not sure what happened after reporting him, but the direct contact with me stopped. There was one incident shortly after where Batman approached one of my girlfriends and demanded her to give me a note from him. She told him no, and he angrily kicked her really hard in the shins. Luckily, a teacher saw him, and he was suspended for a week. Fast forward to my junior year. I am now drum major of my marching band, taking a buttload of AP classes, and generally enjoying teenage life. I had completely forgotten about Batman and his crap at this point. One day after band practice, I hop on my after-school bus. One of my friends, George, happens to be on the same one. He sits in the two-seater. I sit across the aisle from him in the three-seater. Just before the bus driver is getting ready to leave, Batman gets on the bus. I instantly freak out, climb over my friend George, and squeeze myself between him and the window. George looks at me with a "what the fuck" face, and I gesture at Batman. Batman sits down in the three-seater that I had just jumped out of. The rest of the full-size school bus was completely empty. Yet, that is where he sat. George luckily lives the farthest away, so I'm confident I will be dropped off first and George will be able to protect me the whole time. Then the bus driver turns around and says, "George, you're furthest away, so I'll do you first." Great. We drop George off. He reluctantly exits the bus, giving me an "I'm so sorry" face the whole time. Batman takes the opportunity to start talking to me. He says that it's his birthday, and I awkwardly respond, "Happy birthday" to him. He continues rambling on about not having anybody to kiss him on his birthday. I think I responded with something like, "I'm sorry. That sucks." He then scooches to the edge of the seat he is on, leans over, and places his hand on my knee. I'm wearing shorts at this point. It's near the end of the year. He starts stroking me in a circular motion with his thumb, so I do everything I can to plaster myself further against the window. I pick my feet up and hug my knees to my chest. He moves his hand but continues leaning in close, rambling how maybe he could come over and we could hang out at my house for his birthday. I tell him I'm too busy with homework, and he continues to insist. I look out the window and notice we are driving on a route that is getting dangerously close to my house, and I start to freak out. I do not want him to know where I live. I suddenly call up to the bus driver and pretend that I accidentally told her the wrong address because I had just moved recently. She gets a little annoyed but agrees to drive me to my new house. I give her a fake address down the street from a close friend's house. We get to my house, and I'm quick to jump up and try to run out of the bus. Batman is quicker, jumps up, and blocks the aisle. He tells me that he won't let me leave until he gets his goodbye kiss. I tell him no. He insists again, and again I say no. He then says, "Okay, fine. How about a birthday hug then?" I feel trapped, and like I have no other way out. I can't believe the damn bus driver isn't noticing any of this happen. I'm thinking she probably couldn't hear our conversation, but figured we were just flirting like normal teenagers do. I reluctantly agree to give him a birthday hug if it means he lets me get off the bus. I lean in to give him an awkward side hug, and he grabs my face and plasters his lips against mine. I struggle to escape, ripping his hands off my head. I jump over the seats and run out of the fucking bus and into a backyard, pretending to live there. As soon as the bus is out of sight, I walk all the way home crying. I didn't say anything about this for a week or so. I started receiving unsolicited IMs from him again. I changed my privacy settings on AIM back to normal eventually, after the first incident, to which I never replied to any of them. Most of them were poorly disguised sexual innuendos. I vividly remember one of his rants being about instruments having sex with each other, in his shitty and creepy ass attempt at somehow playing towards my interests. Eventually, the girl I was dating at the time noticed I had been acting really weird. She eventually squeezed the whole thing out of me and took me straight to the principal's office and complained on my behalf. She made me print out all the IMs I had ever received from him, including the ones from freshman year. That man was suspended for 2 weeks. After his suspension was over, one of the vice principals had the nerve to ask if I would agree to chat one-on-one with Batman because he wanted to apologize. She emphasized that it would be in a safe and controlled environment. I said no, that I never wanted to speak with Batman again. She spent the next week pestering me about giving him a second chance and letting him apologize. The last interaction I ever had with him was a nasty handwritten letter that he had shoved into my locker calling me a bitch because I lied to the school ruined his reputation and got him in trouble with his parents. I poured ketchup on the note at lunch, rolled it up, shoved it in an empty water bottle, and threw it in the trash. Batman, I hope that we never, ever meet again. The Mole Night Shift by Jorbo125. Okay, so a little backstory before I tell you one of the crazy experiences of mine that happened during my 2-year security career from 2013 to 2015. I am a 6'7" male in Australia. I'd like to think I'm a fairly tough and intimidating guy. But some of the shit that used to go on at the mall I used to work the night shift for still gives me goosebumps to this day. So the mall I worked at was very, very large. Probably the largest in my state, I'd say. And all the way up to about 8 p.m, it would still be quite busy. Only around 9:30 would we manage to usher all of the stragglers out, and only about 11 p.m. would all of the business owners have left. My job was basically to patrol the mall and make sure that no one was sticking around after the doors were closed during the night. We didn't have guns or batons, only a kind of mace that was very rarely used. There were multiple occasions where we would find would-be thieves hiding around trying to break into shops after dark, but they were normally far outnumbered by the 4 to 5 of us on shift at a time, and they would usually be intimidated by me or some of the other imposing members of security. This one night though, shit started getting really weird for me on the night shift. So I'd say it was about 2 o'clock, and I was standing in the middle of the empty food court eating a sandwich. This was the only part of the mall that had any light at nighttime, due to the skylight, so it was comfortable to eat there. While I was eating though, I heard a dull scraping noise from the hallway, leading off from the food courts and to some toilets. It sounded like a piece of metal dragging across the floor. I was immediately put on edge, and I flicked on my torch, flashlight, without a moment of hesitation. I can remember creeping down the hallway, flashlight in hand, illuminating a good 6 or 7 meters in front of me. As I got closer and closer to the end of the hall, the noise became louder and louder, until I was at the end of the hallway, and there was a toilet doors to the left and the right of me. I could tell the sound was coming from the female toilet, so I gripped the handle and opened the door a tiny little crack. The noise was now very clear and had me not scared but confused. I yelled, "Oi, who's in there?" The noise quickly stopped. I paused a moment, listening hard through the tiny crack in the door, and I swear to fucking God I could hear breathing now. Low, male breathing. I shut the door, still gripping the handle tightly, and flicked on my radio. "This is 1-3, I need help in food court bathrooms, I think someone's here." No response. This was really strange, and it put me further on edge. Policy was to always answer the radio, and now I was truly becoming quite alarmed. "This is 1-3, does anyone copy?" Still no response. I can remember whispering to myself, "What the actual fuck?" I again opened the door a tiny crack. "Listen, mate," I said, sounding as intimidating as possible. "If you don't fucking come out with your hands up, you're going to end up eating your teeth tonight. Do you want that?" I sat there at the door, quite honestly terrified at this point, but there was no response. In fact, now there was no noise at all. I yelled into the bathroom. "Okay, mate, I'm coming in. If you do anything stupid, it's not my fault you'll never walk again." I tried my hardest to sound scary, but my voice was quivering at this point. This whole situation made no sense at all. Why would someone be in the female bathrooms? What was the metal noise? What the fuck is even happening? I very slowly opened the door and scanned my flashlight slowly across the room. All the cubicles were open. Weird. But other than that, the room was totally empty. I was totally shitting myself about now. I was definitely losing it. I walked into the center of the bathroom, closing the door behind me. Scared to the core, I let out a feint. "This is some horror movie shit, Come out." When I heard the long, whining squeak of the door behind me, I spin around, basically crying at this point, and shone my torch on a fucking massive man, at least a head taller than me, or so it seemed, in my state of mind at the time. He was Caucasian, and at least in his 40s, with a mat of grey hair all over his forehead. He was mid-opening the door, but he stopped dead, still in the middle of his action. He just looked at me, smiling this guilty fucking smile like a kid would make when he gets caught stealing biscuits or some shit like that. I'm not going to lie. I was so scared I froze. He lifted his finger up to his mouth. Before swinging the door open all the way and sprinting out with what looked like some type of small metal box in his hand. Turns out he was just behind the toilet door when I was opening it, and I totally missed him. I was so fucking close to him, I didn't even fucking notice him. He could have killed me if he had a knife or something, and that thought still haunts me to this day. Later that night, my radio miraculously started working again, and I got right on telling my coworkers about my story. They collectively went pale when I told them what happened. They all had similar stories, but none that were as much of a close shave as mine. I worked the night shift for another week after that before I quit. I'm not sticking around a job like that. I needed help, and for some reason my radio fucked itself. Why? So weird old guy in the toilets. Let's not meet again. Doesn't Give Up by Chippy Saz. This first started when I was in school. I was maybe 10 or so. My friends and I all lived relatively close to each other and would always walk to school together and back home again. The area I lived in was a nice area that was fairly populated. One day, we were walking home, about 5 of us, all girls, and this man just walks out of this alleyway. The alleyway he walked out of led to a house, but he didn't come from the house. Instead, it looked like he just waited at the corner and then walked out when he saw us. Straight away, I was wary because he stared at us all intensely and had a kind of malicious look on his face. He was about mid or early 20s, normal weight, and had brown hair. Anyways, this guy is walking really close to us, and when I pointed it out, my friends were saying, "Oh my god, that's him from yesterday. That's the guy." I can't remember why I didn't walk home the day before with them. Maybe I left school early. So I started asking what they were talking about, and they told me that he had come out of the same place the day before and followed behind them while sucking a pacifier. I know it sounds fake, but my friends wouldn't have lied about that. So after that day, for the next few weeks, we would see the guy hanging outside our school, and at first we thought he might be collecting someone, but he never did. Every day he would wait outside the gates of our school and follow us home. However, he never followed us into the housing estates where we lived. Until one day, 3 of us were walking home, and my friend Emma lives in a different estate to us, and we part ways when we come to her estate. At that point, the guy was still following us. I get home, and about 10 minutes later, Emma rings me crying. She told me that the guy followed her into her estate. So she walked faster, not wanting him to know where she lived. As she gets into her house, which is empty, because her mom wasn't home from work yet, she ran to the window to see where the guy went, and as she looks out, she saw that the guy was stopping at every house in her cul-de-sac and looking in the windows. For her, we guess. She told me he didn't see her and doesn't know which is her house, so he made his way out of the estate. We tell our parents and they kind of brush it off. Then one day my friend Charlotte and I are walking home and we see him on a bus going by. He literally had himself pressed up against the window, staring intensely at us. We ignore him and keep walking. Not 5 minutes later, I look behind and there he is, pacing after us. Not once had he spoken to us, by the way. I was on Bebo one day. A guy added me, and I'm looking at his picture in utter shock that it was him, and his real name. I'm probably 11 now, and he started sending me provocative texts and telling me that I am sexy and beautiful, etc. I tell my friends, and he had added them too. Just my group of friends. We all ignore him and block him. Then he would add us again on a different account, and just spell his name different. We told our parents, and still, they didn't seem too concerned. One day walking home, it was Charlotte, myself, and another girl. We walk into my estate, and my estate isn't that big, and everyone knows everyone. My house is first, so I say bye to my friends, and they go around the corner because that's where they live. My mom had the doors open, because it was a really nice day out, so as I'm walking in, I notice out of the corner of my eye, somebody on crutches walking into my estate, and lo and behold, it's the guy that I told my mom for the past year about. Finally, she had a chance to see him. I start screaming, "Mom, come quick here, it's a guy." We didn't even know he had followed us. She comes out and he sees me pointing at him, and he picks up his crutches and runs. Then I remember he's running in the direction of my friends, so I rang them and told them. And they were just at the other girl's house, so she told her stepdad, and he ran out. And the guy went hiding in the estate. My friend Charlotte then stopped walking home with us out of pure terror. But I, on the other hand, was too naive and thought I was invincible. One day we see him on the weekend, walking all around my estate, looks and looks. So I walk across the road to him while my friends are begging me not to, and I kept saying, "Hi, hi, hey," but he ignored me and looked honestly scared. I was a petite, skinny child. Then one morning I got a lift to school with Charlotte, and it was weird because we never saw the guy in the morning, but there he was. We told Charlotte's mom, and she was furious and went chasing but lost him. Over the next few years, I got added by him on Bebo and Facebook constantly. When I went into secondary school, there was no sight of him. Due to other circumstances, I moved to another school and was not close with my old friends. Every time he added me on Facebook, he would also add them. One time I texted him when he started asking me out on dates. He is now in his late 20s. And I told him he was the guy following us, and he freaked out and started threatening me, and then he blocked me. So about 2 years passed, and no ads from him. I was talking to my friend Charlotte, and she started telling me how the guy actually started dating a 15-year-old girl called Sunita that I know. She knew this because he would pick her up from school. When my old friends found out, they went to the principal and informed her about the past, and they talked to Sunita. Eventually, they ended it. As to who ended it or why, I do not know. So coincidentally, a month or so after being told this, a girl called Lucy added me on Facebook. I've never seen this girl before, and she started texting me. I was asking her why she added me, and she told me she went to my old school, but I knew everybody in my school because it wasn't that big, and she definitely wasn't in it. And then she told me she was friends with Sunita, so me being curious, I asked Sunita if she knew her, and of course she said no. So I informed Lucy, and then she went on to say they were old friends, and I told her that Sunita was adamant that she didn't know her. To which Lucy flipped out at me and started calling me a slut and a bitch, and other words to which I didn't reply. Then the next day, I got an ad from another girl called Zoe. She started asking me, do I remember the guy that used to follow me? And I was like, how do you know? And by the way, I'm 19 now, and this was only a few months ago. She goes on to say someone in my school told her. And I know this isn't true because none of us ever talked about it. But she knew every detail, even about the pacifier. I know this is none of my friends because we are all touchy about this and would never do that. Anyways, she is asking me like 100 questions about him and what I thought of him. And next of all, a picture pops up on the chat. It's a selfie of him which looks like it was just taken. So I replied that was him. And she started saying that she is supposed to go on a date with him and wants to know what he was like, which I found very odd. How would she know I knew him and what happened and stuff? I wouldn't answer her other questions. And when I say I know this is him and not a real page, they freak again and start insulting me, and then telling me I am never to talk to them or reply to them. I didn't reply, but they kept sending messages about how I am not to reply, so I blocked them. After that, I told my friends not to accept those two pages, and after that, I haven't had any other instances with him. But I don't think it will be the last time.